Hi everybody, Chapter 5, Charlotte. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and stared into the blackness, listening to sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. A barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there's usually something stirring. The first time he woke, he heard Templeton the rat gnawing a hole. Templeton's teeth scraped loudly against the wood and made quite the racket. That crazy rat, why does he have to stay up all night grinding his teeth and destroying people's property? Why can't he go to sleep like any decent animal? The second time Wilbur awoke, he heard the goose turning on her nest and chuckling to herself. "What time is it?" whispered Wilbur to the goose. "Probably obbly, about 11:30. Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur?" "Too many things on my mind," said Wilbur. "Well," said the goose, "that's not my trouble. I've got nothing on my mind, but I've got too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on 8 eggs? "No," said Wilbur. "I suppose it is uncomfortable. How long does it take a goose egg to hatch?" Approximately 30 days. But I cheat. On warm afternoons, I just pull a little straw over the eggs and I go for a walk." Wilbur yawned and went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard again the voice saying, "I'll be a friend to you. Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning." About a half hour before dawn, Wilbur woke and listened. The barn was still dark. The sheep lay motionless, and even the goose was quiet. On the main floor, nothing stirred. The cows were resting, the horses dozed. Templeton had quit work and gone off somewhere. The only sound was a slight scraping noise from the rooftop. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm and quiet. Day is almost here, he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared. One by one, the stars went out. Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with her head tucked under a wing. Then he could see the sheep and the lambs, and the sky lightened. "Oh, beautiful day, it is here at last. Today I shall find my friend." Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen. He examined the window ledge, stared at the ceiling, but he saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he would have to speak up. He hated to break the lovely stillness of morning by using his voice, but he couldn't think of any other way to locate the mysterious new friend. So Wilbur cleared his throat. "Attention, please. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make himself known by giving me an appropriate signal?" Wilbur listened. All the other animals lifted their heads and stared. Wilbur was determined to get in touch with his unknown friend. "Attention, please. I will repeat the message. Will the person who addressed me at bedtime last night speak up? Please tell me where you are, if you are my friend." The sheep looked at each other in disgust. "Stop this nonsense, Wilbur. If you have a new friend here, you're probably disturbing his rest. And the quickest way to ruin a friendship is to wake somebody up in the morning. How can you be sure your friend is an early riser?" "I beg everyone's pardon," said Wilbur. "I didn't mean to be objectionable." He lay down in the manure facing the door. He didn't know it, but his friend was very near. And the sheep was right. The friend was still asleep. Soon Lurvy appeared with slops for breakfast. Wilbur rushed out, ate everything in a hurry, and licked the trough. The sheep moved off down the lane, and then, just as Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard again the thin voice from the night before. "Salutations," said the voice. Wilbur jumped to his feet. What?" he cried. "Salutations," repeated the voice. "What are they and where are you?" screamed Wilbur. Please tell me where you are. And what are salutations?" "That means greetings," said the voice. "When I say salutations, it's just a fancy way of saying hello. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I used it at all. As for where I am, easy. Look up. Here I am. Look, I'm waving." At last, Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a kindly way. Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a big spider web. And hanging from the top, head down, was a large gray spider, about the size of a gumdrop. She had 8 legs, and she was waving one of them at Wilbur. "See me now?" "Oh, yes, indeed," said Wilbur. "How are you? Good morning. Salutations. Pleased to meet you. What's your name?" "My name," said the spider, "is Charlotte." "Charlotte what?" asked Wilbur. "Charlotte A. Cavatica, but just call me Charlotte." "I think you're beautiful," said Wilbur. "Well, I am pretty," said Charlotte. "There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see me." "Why can't you?" asked the pig. "I'm right here." "Yes, but I'm nearsighted. I've always been nearsighted. It's good in some ways, but not so good in others. Watch me wrap up this fly. A fly that had been crawling along Wilbur's trough had flown up into the lower part of Charlotte's web and was tangled in the sticky threads. The fly was beating its wings furiously. First, said Charlotte, I dive at him. As she dropped tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end. Next, I wrap him up. She grabbed the fly, threw a few jets of silk around it, and rolled over and over, wrapping it so it couldn't move. Wilbur watched in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he detested flies, he was sorry for this one. There, now I knock him out so he'll be more comfortable, and she bit the fly. He can't feel a thing now, she remarked. He'll make a perfect breakfast for me. You mean you eat flies? Gasped Wilbur. Certainly flies, bugs, grasshoppers, beetles, moths, butterflies, cockroaches, gnats, daddy longlegs, crickets, anything that's careless enough to get caught in my web. I have to live, don't I? Why, yes, of course, said Wilbur. Do they taste good? Delicious. Of course, I don't really eat them. I drink them. I drink their blood, said Charlotte, and her pleasant, thin voice grew thinner and thinner. Don't say that, said Wilbur. Please don't say things like that. Why not? It's true, and I have to say what's true. I'm not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but it's the way I'm made. I just naturally build a web and trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me, and her mother was a trapper before her. All our family have been trappers, way back for thousands and thousands of years. That's miserable, said Wilbur. He was sad because his new friend was so bloodthirsty. Yes, it is, said Charlotte, but I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think up this idea of spinning a web, but it was pretty clever. And since then, all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's cruel, said Wilbur. Well, you can't talk. You have your meals brought in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I've got to get my own living. I live by my own wits. I've got to be sharp and clever or I'll go hungry. I've got to think things out. And it just so happens, my friend, that when it comes to flies and insects and bugs, and furthermore, do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and there would be so many of them they would destroy the earth? Really, said Wilbur, I wouldn't want that to happen. Maybe your web is a good thing after all. The goose had been listening to this conversation and chuckling. There are a lot of things Wilbur doesn't know about life, she thought. He's really a very innocent little pig. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. He has no idea that Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy are plotting to kill him. And the goose raised herself a bit and poked her eggs a little further under her so they would receive the full heat from her warm body. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur lay down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and from the excitement of meeting someone for the first time. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend all right, but what a gamble that friendship is. Charlotte is fierce, brutal, bloodthirsty, everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her, even though she is pretty and clever? Wilbur was suffering the doubts and fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time, he was able to discover that he was wrong about Charlotte. Underneath her bold and cruel exterior, she had a kind heart, and she was to prove loyal and true to the very end. See you tomorrow.